The team wasn't trying to predict lottery numbers. They were trying to do something far more dangerous. A small group of engineers believed they could create legitimate winning lottery tickets after the winning numbers had already been drawn. If they were right, they wouldn't just beat a lottery. They would undermine the central assumption behind every electronic lottery system in existence. And if they succeeded often enough, millions of dollars could quietly flow out of a system designed specifically to prevent that from ever happening. The question wasn't whether lotteries could be predicted. The question was whether the system itself could be fooled. For years, lottery officials trusted that once a draw was complete, the outcome was locked forever. Tickets purchased after that moment were worthless. That rule wasn't merely policy. It was the foundation of the entire business. Without it, public trust would collapse overnight. Yet somewhere deep inside a maze of software, databases, validation servers, and retail terminals, there may have been a crack. Tiny, invisible, but real. And a group of engineers had decided to find it. Modern electronic lotteries look almost impossible to attack. Every ticket purchase creates a digital trail. Retail terminals communicate with central servers. Draw results are generated inside highly secured environments. Transaction logs are stored, timestamps are recorded, and prize claims are audited. From the outside, the system appears airtight. Unlike roulette wheels, there are no mechanical imperfections to exploit. Unlike blackjack, there are no cards to count. The numbers are random, the process is automated, and every step is monitored. That's exactly why most people searching for an edge focus on prediction. They try to guess the future. The engineers took a completely different approach. They ignored the randomness entirely. Because in complex computer systems, randomness is rarely the weakest link. Humans are. Every large technical system is built from thousands of assumptions made by programmers, operators, and administrators. If even one of those assumptions was wrong, an opening might exist. The mission became brutally simple. Map the entire life cycle of a lottery ticket and identify every moment when information moved from one system to another. Somewhere during that journey, something might break. The first stage of the operation produced nothing. The engineers began dissecting the lottery process step by step. A ticket was purchased at a retailer. The request traveled through communication networks to a central processing system. The ticket was validated, stored, time-stamped, and eventually compared against official draw results. On paper, the process looked flawless. Every path ended in the same conclusion. Once the winning numbers existed, the game was over. But the team understood something most gamblers didn't. Large computer systems rarely operate as a single machine. They're collections of separate machines constantly exchanging information. That exchange creates delays. Tiny delays, usually measured in seconds, sometimes milliseconds. Most of the time, those delays don't matter. Sometimes they matter a lot. The engineers began recreating the lottery workflow in simulations, testing different scenarios, and measuring how information moved across the system. Most experiments failed immediately. The system behaved exactly as designed. Again and again, the tests produced nothing useful. Weeks of work generated no exploitable weakness. For many teams, that would have ended the mission. It didn't, because failure itself was producing valuable information. Every unsuccessful test eliminated another dead end. And slowly, the map of the fortress was becoming clearer. As the simulations expanded, the team stopped focusing on the draw itself and started focusing on timing. Specifically, they wanted to know how quickly winning numbers spread through the system after a draw was completed. It sounded like an obscure technical question. It wasn't. If different parts of the lottery infrastructure updated at slightly different times, then the system might briefly disagree with itself. And whenever systems disagree, vulnerabilities appear. The engineers began collecting operational data. They monitored draw schedules. They observed retailer terminals. They compared timestamps. They measured how quickly information appeared in different locations. Most observations revealed nothing unusual. But eventually, patterns emerged. Small ones. Certain components updated almost instantly. Others lagged behind, sometimes only by seconds, sometimes longer. The delays weren't random, they were consistent, repeatable. That changed everything. Suddenly, the mission no longer seemed theoretical. There might actually be a narrow operational window between the moment winning results became known and the moment every part of the infrastructure fully synchronized. But there was a problem. Even if such a window existed, exploiting it would require extraordinary precision. Miss the timing by a few seconds, and the ticket would be rejected instantly. Hit it perfectly, and something remarkable might happen. The engineers had finally found their first real lead. The discovery raised an entirely new problem. Finding a vulnerability inside a laboratory simulation was one thing. Exploiting it inside a live lottery system was something else entirely. Real-world systems are messy. Networks slow down. Retail terminals behave unpredictably. Software patches appear without warning. And unlike a casino table, every transaction inside a lottery system leaves evidence. The engineers understood that their first live attempt couldn't target a multi-million-dollar jackpot. The risk was too high. Instead, they began cautiously. Small experiments, small prizes, small exposures. If the exploit worked, they needed to know whether the resulting tickets would survive the validation process all the way through payout. The first attempts were nerve-wracking. Timing had to be exact. The exploit window appeared and disappeared within moments. Too early and the system rejected the transaction. Too late and the ticket became worthless. Several early tests failed completely. Some tickets never validated. Others produced no winnings at all. For a brief period, it looked like the vulnerability might be too unreliable to monetize. But then one attempt worked. A ticket that shouldn't have existed passed through the system without raising alarms. It was accepted as legitimate. The system paid. The fortress had been breached. That single success changed the mission overnight. Until then, the exploit had been a theory supported by technical evidence. Now it was a working operation. But success created pressure. Every winning ticket generated a permanent record. Every claim increased the statistical footprint of the team. The engineers couldn't simply repeat the same process over and over from the same location. Doing so would be suicidal. Instead, they approached the problem like engineers. They optimized. Ticket purchases were spread across different retailers. Claims were distributed across multiple individuals. Prize amounts were intentionally kept modest. The goal wasn't to get rich quickly. The goal was to remain invisible. And for a while it worked. The winnings accumulated gradually. Hundreds of small victories blended into the normal background noise of lottery activity. Security systems are designed to identify dramatic anomalies. A handful of unexpected wins rarely triggers panic, but there was a hidden weakness in the team's own strategy. Small prizes meant small profits. The operation required precision, planning, and coordination. If they wanted the mission to justify the risk, eventually they would have to scale. And scaling meant visibility. It always does. The decision to pursue larger payouts marked the most dangerous turning point in the operation. Once the engineers became confident in their understanding of the system, caution slowly gave way to ambition. The exploit was working. Repeatedly. The temptation was obvious. Why settle for hundreds of dollars when the same vulnerability might unlock jackpots worth tens or hundreds of thousands? So the team expanded. More attempts, larger targets, bigger claims. The money started arriving faster. What had begun as technical experimentation was becoming a highly profitable enterprise. But large lottery prizes attract attention for a reason. Every significant payout is reviewed. Every major claim creates paperwork. And unlike casino winnings, lottery jackpots are public events. Names appear, records are archived, patterns emerge. At first, officials saw nothing unusual. People win lotteries every day. That's the business. Yet as more successful claims accumulated, a troubling question began circulating inside the lottery organization. How could the same network of individuals continue experiencing extraordinary luck? On its own, any single win was perfectly plausible. Together, the numbers began telling a different story. And somewhere inside the organization's security department, someone decided to take a closer look. The first review wasn't a full investigation. It was routine. Analysts pulled transaction histories and examined recent payouts, expecting to find nothing more than coincidence. Instead, they discovered something uncomfortable. Many of the winning tickets shared unusual characteristics. Some had been purchased extraordinarily close to draw deadlines. Others displayed timing patterns that seemed statistically improbable. None of it proved fraud, not even close. But experienced investigators know that sophisticated operations rarely reveal themselves through obvious mistakes. They reveal themselves through patterns, tiny inconsistencies repeated over time. As analysts expanded their review, more questions appeared. Why were certain retailers associated with an unusual number of winning claims? Why did some winners seem connected through geography, business relationships, or personal associations? Most importantly, why did these anomalies keep appearing around the same types of transactions? The investigation remained quiet. The engineers had no idea they were being watched. As far as they knew, the operation remained invisible. It didn't. The fortress had finally recognized that it was under attack. The only question now was whether investigators could figure out how the breach had happened before the engineers struck again. Investigators began doing what engineers had done months earlier. They started mapping the system. Every suspicious ticket was reconstructed from the ground up. Analysts examined purchase timestamps, terminal logs, claim records, and communication data flowing through the lottery infrastructure. At first, the evidence appeared frustratingly incomplete. The tickets themselves looked legitimate. Validation records showed no obvious tampering. No malware had been detected. No employee had reported suspicious behavior. On the surface, everything appeared normal. But normal systems don't produce impossible statistical outcomes. The security team knew that if fraud existed, it wasn't occurring at the level of the lottery numbers themselves. The randomness was intact. Something else had been compromised. That realization changed the entire investigation. Instead of asking who predicted the numbers, investigators began asking a different question. How could a valid ticket exist under circumstances where it should have been impossible? Slowly, transaction timelines were layered on top of system synchronization records. As analysts compared thousands of events, tiny discrepancies started appearing. Certain winning tickets seemed to exist inside narrow windows when different parts of the infrastructure briefly disagreed with one another. Individually, the anomalies looked harmless. Together, they pointed towards something much more alarming. The deeper investigators looked, the more disturbing the picture became. The vulnerability wasn't the result of a broken random number generator. It wasn't a rogue retailer or a dishonest claims employee. It appeared to be embedded directly inside the operational architecture itself. Under specific conditions, different subsystems processed information at slightly different times. Those delays had always existed. Engineers had built the system assuming nobody could exploit them. That assumption was now collapsing. The investigation expanded rapidly. Historical records dating back years were reopened. Security teams searched for additional suspicious claims that had previously escaped notice. They found them. More and more winning tickets began fitting the same pattern. The scope of the operation suddenly looked much larger than anyone had imagined. What investigators had originally treated as an isolated anomaly was now beginning to resemble a long-running campaign. But there was still a problem. Understanding the vulnerability wasn't enough. Investigators needed people. They needed names. Without that, proving criminal intent in court would be extraordinarily difficult. The engineers remained hidden behind layers of legitimate transactions, multiple claimants, and years of carefully managed operational discipline. Breaking through that shield would require finding a human mistake. Eventually, investigators found one. Sophisticated operations rarely fail because the underlying method stops working. They fail because human beings become predictable. As analysts connected retailers, claim records, travel patterns, and financial activity, a network slowly emerged. Certain individuals appeared repeatedly around suspicious wins. Certain locations appeared far too often to be coincidence. Relationships that initially seemed unrelated suddenly formed a coherent structure. The walls were closing in. Surveillance intensified. Additional transaction monitoring was deployed. Investigators quietly tracked new claims as they occurred, hoping to observe the operation in real time. The engineers still believed they controlled the pace of the mission. In reality, they had already lost the initiative. Every new attempt generated fresh evidence. Every additional payout strengthened the case. The very success that had made the operation profitable was now making it visible. What had once been an invisible technical exploit had become a pattern investigators could anticipate. And once investigators can anticipate behavior, they can start planning interventions. The mission had entered its most dangerous phase. The engineers were still hunting jackpots. Investigators were hunting them. When the operation finally began unraveling, the consequences reached far beyond the individuals involved. Lottery officials discovered that the greatest threat to their system had never been mathematical prediction. It had been misplaced trust. Complex systems depend on assumptions. The assumption that every subsystem updates simultaneously. The assumption that timing discrepancies are harmless. The assumption that internal processes don't need to be attacked because they're invisible to the public. The engineers had systematically disproved each of those assumptions. Investigations led to criminal charges, prosecutions, and extensive legal battles as authorities reconstructed years of activity and presented evidence showing how the exploit had functioned. But the story didn't end in the courtroom. It spread throughout the entire lottery industry. Security protocols were rewritten. Timestamp verification procedures became stricter. Independent audits expanded. System synchronization processes were redesigned. Engineers across the industry were forced to confront an uncomfortable reality. Randomness alone does not create security. Architecture does, because a lottery can possess perfect randomness and still be vulnerable if the surrounding infrastructure contains a flaw. And for years, a small team of engineers had quietly proven exactly that.